Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's County Council meeting. Our invocation tonight is from Reverend Debbie Bartley. She is with the First United Methodist Church of St. Louis, and our Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Councilman Mike Klinghammer. If you would please stand and remove your caps.
And it's St. Charles, not St. Louis Methodist Church.
My bad.
Let us pray. Gracious God, we come together this evening so thankful for this amazing county in which we live. We ask your presence be with us, that the conversations and decisions made tonight will be made with careful and thoughtful discernment. Give to this council the guidance and wisdom that will enable them to stand in the gap for those whose voices cry out to be heard. For those who are recovering from recent storms and floods, for those who are hungry, who are seeking shelter and housing, who seek opportunities for gainful employment, and for those who seek simply to be seen rather than ignored, we pray. For those serving selflessly so that the county's residents' basic needs and safety are met. For those offering acts of mercy and compassion, who see a need and do something about it, we pray. Send your blessings upon our county executive, the members of this council, and all those serving in St. Charles County's governance. Their tasks are great, and our needs are many. Keep their hearts and minds open to all the possibilities for offering hope to the people of St. Charles County. Give to them, God, an extra measure of wisdom, courage, and grace to faithfully complete the work for which they have been elected and called to do. With grateful hearts we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call the roll, please.
Councilmember Joe Cronin.
Here.
Councilmember Joe Brazel. Councilmember Dave Hammond.
Here.
Councilmember Mike Elam.
Here.
Councilmember Terry Hollander. Here. Councilmember Mike Klinghammer.
Here.
Councilmember John White.
Here.
Well, I've already messed up on the county council meeting, so no hitter for tonight. Sorry about this St. Charles and St. Louis thing. I don't know where that came from. I got to sleep more. We're up to public presentations. I understand that we have a public presentation for tonight.
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Chairman, I'm confident you're going to rebound nicely from your guffaw. That is so unlike you, but it just goes to
appreciate your
show us
confidence.
that all of us are human. Mr. Chairman, members of the council, just a few items here. First of all, I want to thank Representative Kurt Barr. He brought us a copy of the, signed by the governor of the Uber Lyft bill.
Nice.
And I will be putting that on a wall somewhere. If anybody has any suggestions, I'll be glad to listen to it. But I think I also got a note from the governor thanking all of us for whatever we did to kind of push that thing forward, and I think we got it some additional publicity, and he was grateful. Last Friday, Mr. Chairman, you called me and asked me to kind of give a report on the flooding, and at the time I anticipated this report might be a lot longer, but we've I think been pretty lucky. Now, saying that, there are some people who have been affected and don't want to downplay the tragedy that they've gone through. But I think all of the homes that are protected by levees, all the levees held. The one levee that didn't was Augusta Bottom Road, but I don't think it protects anybody's home. But it does protect the Augusta Bottom Road. So the Augusta Bottom levee broke, and we're back to square one. Mr. Brazel, I called Harold Ellis and told him he couldn't retire now. we need to get back on that. And, but just a little bit about kind of an instant response report. This is kind of an overview of what the county departments and the EOC did. Most of what we do is coordination between the various jurisdictions. We worked with the city of West Alton, and we worked with MoDOT on road closures. We worked with the Rivers Point Fire Protection District down in the north end, Consolidate North County Levee District. They did have a rather serious situation. They had an area that has been in need of repair for several years, and the Corps has drug its feet and not fixed it because it's on Corps property. So as soon as the water started coming up, we sent some material down there, and the farmers got out on their tractors and fixed it quick. And they were able to avoid any kind of problem. But, you know, I guess it's a credit to that levee district, because I drove down to the dam, and the water at one point was flowing over the road, because the road was on the top of the levee, and the water was flowing over it. Is about that thick, okay? But my point is that, and I drove on Solly Road too, and the water was right up to the top, okay? Now, when the water comes right up the top, obviously it doesn't go over. But if you haven't really maintained those levees well, they'll break. So congratulations to the people in those levee districts that held, and if they hadn't done good maintenance work over the years, we could have had a real problem. The good news, of course, it was a flash flood, so once it went up, within a day it started to go down. But anyway, all the levees did hold except for Augusta Bottom. We worked with Augusta Fire Protection District, Augusta Bottom Levee District, Central County Fire and Rescue. These levee districts, what we basically do with them is when they think they need emergency repairs or measures, we go ahead and provide the material. We'll bring sand and gravel, millings. We provided 375 tons of rock, 425 tons of sand, 100 tons to Augusta Bottoms. Didn't help much. Road millings, crushed concrete, 190 tons, 26,000 sandbags, and miscellaneous flood fighting equipment and accessories. The estimated cost of that material right now is about $8,700, but that's not final. So there will be a cost, but it will not be major. And I'm sure we will continue to talk about flooding issues in the next couple months. I think I'll stop there and ask if there's any questions.
Does the council have any questions?
Okay.
No, I think MoDOT did a great job. Everybody did a good job with this flood. It was somewhat unexpected. And last weekend when it was raining, I've never seen it rain so hard in my life. It was like buckets. It was unbelievable. And the roads, the 94 was flooded in multiple spots. I've been out there 20 years. I've never seen the water that high ever. It was unbelievable. But they got the roads cleaned off. When the water went down on Sunday morning, they cleaned the roads, took down the barricades, and it was done. So everybody did a great job with what happened.
They're better at that than snow removal, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, they are better than that. That's for
Mr.
sure.
Chairman, Jared wants to talk a little bit about what we've done to respond to the recent tornado. So I'll ask him to come up.
Thank you. That's a nice plaque, by the way.
Where do you want it?
We'll find somewhere appropriate to hang that.
Put it right behind your desk so we can remember that we influence state government sometimes. Yeah.
Hello, sir.
Good evening. I'd like to speak briefly about a wind event. It turned out to be a tornado that we experienced on April 29th, 2017. In the short period I've been here, this will be the first disaster that Building and Code Enforcement responded to. And we got called out that afternoon to respond to what we were told was a wind event with an unknown number of structures affected. So we came out about 4:30 on that Saturday afternoon. As you can see there on the slide, you can see the path of the tornado, about 6 miles from Campville all the way up to Lake Center Marina. And we had several places that were hit, and it kind of popped up and down. But we showed up, I showed up to the Emergency Operations Center. We had 2 inspectors that went out to the field and met up with our mobile base command. Went out and took a look and did initial assessments. We ended activities the first Saturday at 9 o'clock. We started on Sunday at 8 a.m. and finished at 11. Of the 36 buildings that had some sort of inspection conducted, we had several that had no damage, so that was great. We tried to go out and take a look at where damage is reported and work our way out, because as this shows up on a map, you can clearly see where the storm hit. You can also see that we had just a couple that had severe damage, and if we go to the next slide here. We had 36 properties inspected. We placarded 0 as unsafe, so that's great. We had 3 that we have restricted use because a portion of the building was damaged and they'll need to pull a permit and get that repaired. And then we had 33 that were inspected. And the total damage that we assessed was $429,959. And we were able to put that information together by the time we left the EOC. So it's a tremendous improvement that we've made on the part of administration and our GIS group and the assessors. And I was very pleased with the way everything went on this disaster. Any questions?
Gentlemen?
Yes. Does that include all the docks that were damaged?
Lakeside, we counted as one parcel because it's one parcel, and when we went through and looked at it, we didn't look at individual docks, but we looked at it as a whole. So it's one of the 36 properties that we inspected.
It looked like it had quite a bit of damage.
It did have quite a bit of damage. This number is based on what the assessed improvement value is on the property. I know those docks, if you have to go back and put new ones in, are very costly. So this is kind of a rough estimate that we were able to come up with in the very beginning.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Were these inspections, were they requested by the property owners, or this just something you did kind of winging on your own?
This is something that we do every time we have a disaster. We need to do an initial assessment so that we can report back to SEMA, who in turn reports back to FEMA to see if there's going to be a disaster declared. So that's part of our emergency operations plan.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Councilman Elam, if I can mention, Jared said, and indicated how much of a change he's made. I don't think he anywhere comes close to defining the scope of how different our response was, how much more real-time information was available to the administration, to emergency management in the EOC. We invest a lot of money in technology, and you see a lot of bills for technology platforms. And CitizenServe and Jared's deployment of that platform in community development has made a significant increase in our ability to respond quickly, provide information to FEMA, and make sure that everyone who's out in the field is knowing what's going on, where we've been already, and what work we have yet to do. So I really commend Jared for having completely transformed this process for St. Charles County.
Excellent.
Thanks, Jared.
Well, thank you, sir. All right, we'll move on to public comments.
We have Russell Bean.
Good evening. My name is Russell Bean. I'm with Selective Solutions. We represent Vertical Bridge, who is the applicant for bill number 4470. I'd just like to let everyone know that I'm here when we get to that item. If you have any questions, I'm available. And then I appreciate everybody, what you guys have said about the flood. My office is in Valley Park.
Ooh.
And we were evacuated, and for 5 days had no idea what was going on. And not only MoDOT, but my end, I'm in Jefferson County as well. And you guys are lucky to have the folks you did. I was able to come up for a planning and zoning meeting the first day that we were evacuated, and just the presence you guys had coming in on that night was amazing. So
Thank you very
sorry to
much.
veer off topic, but I was very impressed at how things were handled here. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Next speaker.
Arnie Deanoff.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the County Council. Arnie A.C. Deanoff, public advocate and county resident. The first things I'd like to talk about are the towers in our county. As we all know, this is a maybe might last 5 or 10 years additional, these towers, and they're all formed as LLCs, limited partnerships, which leaves little liability for taxpayers. In 4470 and Bill 4473, I'm asking that the County Council require a condition of $80,000 bond. These are all LLC companies which have no responsibility when this technology is obsolete. And so this will ensure the taxpayers will not be stuck with the bill to remove these ugly and atrocious towers that diminish property values by 25 to 30%. We need fairness and full transparency back to our county government, as I've spoken over and over before. Before the County Council meeting was the Ad Hoc Development and Building Research Committee. How was this committee formed is what I'm asking the council. Why is its members not cognizant and a cross makeup of the entire community, but a very select few? It sounds like the Special Interest County Country Club. One, we have Bill Lukenhaus, a developer and subdivision owner. I see money and dollar signs. Two, we have Brad Gross, a land attorney who represents several applicants before this council with zoning matters, planning and zoning issues, and subdivisions. Three is Don Myers, Vice President of People's Bank, who lends the money to these developers. Then we have Celeste Reuter, who's the Executive Vice President of the St. Louis Home Builders Association. She had a seat at the table at the first meeting, and at the second meeting, she sat in the audience. So I'm trying to figure out who's controlling what. Who are we making these rules for in terms of the building codes? Developers making profits, or are we looking after the community and the county of our over 400,000 valued residents? We are setting up standards that benefit the Home Builders Association and allow home builders to cut corners and make additional profits while our home quality declines. I ask the public to follow the money, to follow the favors, the gifts, the meals, the tickets, the campaign contributions to certain elected officials sitting on this dais and to my right. Chairman and County Councilman Hammond, who is driving and directing our people's destiny of this committee? Of major concern is on tonight's agenda is the introduction of proposed Bill 4475, which has 5 council members miraculously. This is of grave concern. Are we putting the cart before the horse when the committee has only held its second meeting just minutes ago, with the third meeting to be held on June 5th? This deals with the International Building Code, the International Residential Building Code, the International Mechanical Code, the International Fuel Code, the National Fire Prevention Code, the National Electrical Code, the International Building Code, the International Plumbing Code.
Thank you, Mr. Dinoff. Your time has expired.
I'm asking you to table this bill. Thank you.
No, there are no more, I'm sorry.
That's it for our speakers? Thank you. We'll move on to oral report. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sir. Can you do me a favor and thank you? I understand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Board. And I'm glad you addressed our wind event as we got letters out there. I own 4 of the buildings that were hit. Well, 3 now, one's gone. But my main concern about what happened here is 3:35 in the afternoon when it hit South Shore Subdivision. Electric kicked off, and witnesses and the security cameras picked up what they could before electric went out. The issue is no sirens. Nobody had any warning. It's like you open that door and somebody punched you in the face. People were sitting in their houses, looking out their kitchen windows, in bed, reading a book, and this was potentially very injurious to a lot of people, or even lethal, in how some of the things being at the wrong place, right place at the wrong time. And the sirens right up the street, it went fine. Monday morning on the 9 o'clock test, it worked great. So I don't know where the problem is. I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but it definitely needs to be addressed because this was potentially a very, very bad situation. And what in our circumstances for the subdivision, they were ready to drop the bridge the week before to our subdivision. And I've been addressing this personally because of the timing of this event. If you cut that bridge off the other end of the subdivision, which happened over the weekend, the road's going to water. And if it wasn't for that bridge being up, the emergency people would not have been there. And I got to commend Rich Hollera. He was instrumental in making sure they didn't drop that till Monday. We're going to check, watch the water levels, And sure enough, instead of waiting for the water, we got flanked by a tornado. So, but I would wish you guys would really address this issue because there was no sirens. In this middle of the afternoon, could have been in the middle of the night, but this was a very bad situation where it could have got real bad. So I appreciate your concern on this and indulgence. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? None? That will close public comments. We'll move on to oral report from the county executive.
Mr. Chairman, on the last point, it's my understanding that, you know, we turn on the sirens, but we're not the weatherman. And I don't think the National Weather Service gave us a heads up. Is that correct? So, you know, unless they tell us there's a tornado in the area, you know, that's when we turn the siren on, and we didn't. No spotters reported it. Yeah, so.
So does it, just so I'm clear, on the procedure of that, the National Weather Service tells us when to hit the sirens, and then we hit the sirens based on their authority?
Unless one of our police officers, I know a couple years ago, one of our police officers actually first saw it and reported it in. But yeah, we don't, we're sitting in the EOC. We don't know what the weather is until the Weather Service tells us.
All right. Thank you. Move on to the consent agenda. Are there any items to be removed from the consent agenda?
Motion for approval is submitted.
Second.
Motion made and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
This consent, any opposed? Consent agenda is approved. We'll move on to, we have emergency bill 4479.
Emergency Bill Number 4479, request by Steve Owen, sponsored by Mike Elam. An emergency ordinance authorizing the county executive to execute an agreement with the city of West Dalton for inspections and assessments of damage caused by flooding or other disasters.
Do we have any questions or comments about this bill?
I'm not sure it's still an emergency, is it, Jennifer? I mean, we put it on last Thursday thinking the worst might happen. So do we want to still do it, or do we want to wait and?
I think West Dalton had requested it kind of in advance of flood season. I don't have the history of why this has always been done just as it occurs, as opposed to just having a standing contract with them. That was something I was going to investigate once Joanne was back. But yeah, I mean, we're standing here today with water levels that are down, so I'm not sure West Dalton would say we absolutely have to have this today if you wanted to.
Although there may be some places outside the levee.
It's,
I think we probably ought to go ahead and do it.
yeah, it's going to rain
Yeah.
Thursday and Friday.
There's a few clubhouses and stuff outside the levee that actually may have damage, so.
Mr. Hammond?
Oh, that's what I was going to ask, whether we had any known damage out there.
I don't know, Jared, do you know of any?
Okay. Mr. Cronin, did you have something?
I think it's supposed to start raining again. Why not get it passed if we need it? Rather have it and need it than need it and not have it, so.
Very well. Carol?
An emergency ordinance authorizing the county executive to execute an agreement with the city of West Dalton for inspections and assessments of damage caused by flooding or other disasters. Councilmember Cronin?
Yes.
Councilmember Brazel?
Yes.
Councilmember Hammond?
Yes.
Councilmember Elam?
Yes.
Councilmember Hollander?
Yes.
Councilmember Klinghammer?
Yes.
Councilmember White?
Yes.
Move on to Bill number 4477 passes. Move on to bills for final passage, starting with Bill 4466.
Bill number 4466, an ordinance authorizing the county executive or his designee to execute two intergovernmental agreements with the Missouri Department of Economic Development, Division of Workforce Development, and the St. Charles County Department of Workforce and Business Development related to the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, Project Year 16 and Project Year 17 annual agreements.
Any questions or comments about this bill? Seeing none?
An ordinance authorizing the county executive or his designee to execute two intergovernmental agreements with the Missouri Department of Economic Development, Division of Workforce Development, and the St. Charles County Department of Workforce and Business Development related to the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, Project Year 16 and Project Year 17 annual agreements. Councilmember Brazel?
Yes.
Councilmember Hammond?
Yes.
Councilmember Elam?
Yes.
Councilmember Hollander?
Yes.
Councilmember Klinghammer?
Yes.
Councilmember White?
Yes.
Councilmember Cronin?
Yes.
Bill number 4466 passes. Move on to Bill 4467.
Bill number 4467, an ordinance authorizing the county executive or his designee to execute an agreement with the United States Marshal Service, a department with the United States Department of Justice, for housing federal prisoners, inmates in the St. Charles County Department of Corrections.
Any questions or comments about this bill? Seeing none?
An ordinance authorizing the county executive or his designee to execute an agreement with the United States Marshal Service, a department within the United States Department of Justice, for housing federal prisoners, inmates in the St. Charles County Department of Corrections. Councilmember Hammond?
Yes.
Councilmember Elam?
Yes.
Councilmember Hollander?
Yes.
Councilmember Klinghammer?
Yes.
Councilmember White?
Yes.
Councilmember Cronin?
Yes.
Councilmember Brazel?
Yes.
Bill number 4467 passes. That concludes bills for final passage. Move on to bills for introduction, starting with Bill 4468.
Bill number 4468, requested by Mike Herbert, sponsored by Joe Brazel. An ordinance amending the zoning district map of the County of St. Charles, Missouri by rezoning land from A Agricultural District to R1B Single Family Residential District as per application RZ 17-04.
Any questions or comments about this bill?
I got some questions.
Yes, sir.
Is this Robert? Robert, is this you? I noticed you, planning, zoning, and staff denied this.
It's a recommendation for denial, yes.
Okay, and it's something about, there's no access for has it got a low road or something?
Right, Circle Drive. Do you remember maybe 2 years ago, there was a variance request for a setback on a mobile home on Circle Drive? It was right next to the creek.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
The bridge that was in question next to that mobile home was just, it's like 2 doors down, 3 doors down from this property. And the subdivision, Weldon Springs Gardens Addition, it was subdivided like 1959, even before the zoning and subdivision regulations. Circle Drive itself, you can go around it 2 ways, but both ways, the creek is, the bridge, I should say, is low enough, it's below the base flood elevation. So basically, it doesn't have flood-free access, you might call it, to this lot. And that's a concern because there's a section of the subdivision ordinance that says that in order to develop a subdivision, the access to it needs to be not flood-free, but not flood-prone. And we interpret that to mean above the base flood elevation. So the specific concern, I know this is a long story, but specific concern is that even though it may be zoned to allow 3 additional lots, once they go for platting, they may not be able to achieve that because of the, doesn't have the, as flood-prone access in Circle Drive.
Well, the other thing they're asking, are they asking for single-family or apartments?
Single-family residential.
Three lots?
I think they could get 3 lots. I haven't penciled it out on paper, but I think they could get 3 lots out of this 1 lot.
What size lots are they trying to?
It would need to be a minimum of 20,000 square foot lots, and they have like 1.6 acres right now.
Okay. And what are those lots in that subdivision? Are those are large lots, aren't? Are those 3 to 4 acre lots? What are those lots?
Well, they range in size from, I think, 1.5 acres around 6 or 7 acres. And the average is, I calculated the average, I think it was like 3 acres, something to that effect.
Okay. Okay. There's been a lot of opposition to this, so, and staff and planning and zoning denied it. Does this require, Keith, does this require a supermajority?
No. Yes, a simple majority.
A simple majority,
It does not trigger a
okay.
supermajority.
Okay.
Council member, I'd mentioned, and Robert's very close to accurate, my recollection was there's 23 lots in this original subdivision. The largest one is over 7 acres. The other 22 are 5 acres or smaller. So I think the math, if you can get 3 20,000 square foot lots out of 1.5 acres, you've got some other very sizable lots in this subdivision that would.
That night at P&Z, we heard from several of the neighbors that were concerned about cutting it down to lots of that size. Now, in full disclosure, the lots on the other side that back up to it are of smaller caliber. They're in the 10,000s, I believe, if I remember correctly.
Right.
They're in the 10,000 square foot size. But in this particular subdivision that are on the loop or the circle are much larger lots.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I think I would have a hard time supporting this development since people are going to buy these homes and then someday it rains and they can't get to their house or leave their house because they're in a flood-prone area and had no idea it was that before they bought the house. You know, if the house is in the floodplain and some of that information is publicly available, or if the property was elevated or whatever to accommodate so it meet the code. So I don't think I could support it.
I agreed with the rest of the members of Planning and Zoning Board that night for two reasons. The flood prone and the size of the lots just doesn't fit with the rest of the neighborhood.
Very well. Any other questions, Mr. Cronin? No? Very well, thank you, Robert. Move on to Bill 4469.
Bill number 4469, request by Michael Hurlbert, sponsored by Joe Brazel, an ordinance amending the zoning district map of the County of St. Charles, Missouri by rezoning land from A Agricultural District to RR Single Family Residential District as per application RZ 17-03.
Any questions or comments about this?
Again, this is just, Robert, again, this is just dividing one lot into two 3-acre lots? Okay, thank you.
You have any questions for Mr. Backus?
No, sir. No, I don't.
Thanks for being here. We'll move on to Bill 4470.
Bill number 4470, request by Michael Hurlbert, sponsored by Joe Cronin, an ordinance granting conditional use permits CUP 17-03 to allow the applicant to increase the height of an existing 107-foot monopole-style communications tower to 160 feet and to allow a 160-foot tall tower to be set back 107 feet from the nearest agricultural or residential district to Randy L. Schott, Janet M. Schott, and Stanley T. Schott, revocable inter vivos trust, property owners, and Selective Solutions LLC applicant.
Any questions or comments? Mr. Cronin?
Gentlemen, would you please come forward from Selective? Just 14 people wrote letters in opposition to this, and just for those folks to know, because my name in the bill doesn't mean I necessarily support this. That's just the custom we have in the council. This is the first I've seen of this. When I read the packet this weekend was the first I saw it. So I do have some questions. There's 14 residents obviously aren't happy with this.
If I can address that a majority of those letters were addressing the status of the property outside of the tower, not necessarily the tower itself.
Okay. Well, those weren't included in our packet, and I requested them, so I'll look those over. But I have one other question for you. When this tower is extended to the full 160 feet, are there any residential homes in the fall zone of that tower?
There are not.
Okay.
At the Planning and Zoning Board, we measured out to the nearest home, and it was beyond 160 feet.
That's all I have, if anybody else has anything.
Very well. Any other questions?
I got a question.
Go ahead.
Are there any towers? What's the closest tower to this one?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you.
Probably, I can tell you, from Lorraine Drive, there's one on Highway Y close to the city of St. Paul proper, probably a mile, I'm guessing. I can Google map it, okay? There's nothing real close. You also got one in downtown O'Fallon. It's pretty close by the crow flies, so.
Correct.
I don't think there's anything, and this is an existing tower site that's serving customers, so.
Correct.
Mr.
President, I think I know where you might have been thinking along the same lines I did at the planning and zoning meeting, and, you know, can we co-locate antennas on other towers and keep the height of the towers down? And unfortunately, we can't require them to do that. It's outside of our purview, so that wasn't something that we could really force them to use a different tower, a different existing tower. This one does need, we went through quite and the gentleman did a very good job explaining the need for the additional height and the amount of higher level service that'll be available. And we all have the smartphones now, and they require a bandwidth that's different than what there was there previously. So I think that's why the P&Z board looked at it and agreed that the recommendation was in the affirmative.
Yeah.
Mr. Hammond?
I just wanted to point out that under state law, we're limited to what we can do as far as requirements on cell towers. somebody previously mentioned required some kind of fee to pay to have it removed down the road. We can't do that under county laws, and it's, the state already mandates the limited powers that we have over communication towers. That's my only comment.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We'll move on to Bill 4471.
Bill number 4471, request by Michael Hurlbert, sponsored by Joe Cronin, an ordinance amending the zoning district map of the County of St. Charles, Missouri by rezoning land from C2 General Commercial District to RR Single Family Residential District as per application RZ 17-05.
Any questions or comments on this bill? Seeing none, we'll move on to 4472.
Bill number 4472, request by Michael Hurlbert, sponsored by Mike Elam, an ordinance authorizing the county executive to execute intergovernmental agreements with special districts that provide sanitary sewer service within St. Charles County in order to authorize those special districts to inspect for compliance with applicable codes, repaired lateral sanitary sewer service lines in unincorporated St. Charles County when those repairs are funded in whole or in part by annual fees levied and imposed by those special districts to fund such repairs.
Any questions or comments on this one? I figured someone would just want to ask Mr. Gross something, so sorry you got away with that one. On to bill number 4473, but it is good to see you.
Bill number 4473, request by Michael Hurlbert, sponsored by Joe Brazel, an ordinance amending ordinance 99-85, granting conditional use permit numbers C525 for a telecommunications tower in excess of 100 feet to William J. and Tracy D. Wooten, property owners, and Selective Solutions applicant.
Any questions or comments about this bill?
I have some questions.
Yes, sir.
Is the applicant here?
Hello. We're not actually Selective Solutions. We're Crown Castle.
Okay. So are you the telecommunication company?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there's another communication pole that's 1,200 feet away that does have available spots on it. Is there any reason why you're not under contract with them?
The customer's currently on the tower. They're just upgrading their equipment. And when they go to upgrade it, the antennas at that point are too big. They can't fit inside the concealment, which is why we were asking to do the flush mount on the outside.
But let me make sure I understand this. Are you adding another pole, or you just, what
We're
exactly?
just adding on the outside. They're currently in the inside, and we're adding antennas on the outside to upgrade the current equipment.
So it's one of those single poles,
Mm-hmm.
right now? And so you want to add like the wings to it? Is that what you're suggesting?
They'll be flush mounted, and they'll be painted to match the tower.
So how big, do you have a drawing of these?
I do.
So it looks a flagpole design. From what I saw, you have one that looks like kind of like a flagpole now, and you're gonna be hanging stuff on the flagpole, right?
Yes.
This part of the diameter of that part of the pole will get bigger.
The what now, I'm sorry?
The diameter of that part of the pole will be bigger than what it is now.
So it just stays as a single pole? It's not like the big radar-looking things, but, because this is right at the entrance of wine country, and it's just,
Can I show this to you?
yeah, absolutely.
If you you can lay it on the overhead, we can all see it then.
There you go.
So this you can see right here. This is what the antenna will look like. So it's not your normal huge antenna. It's a smaller, it'll be flush mount right next to the antenna, so it won't have the big leg out with the bars.
Is that like a upside down? Go one more, yeah. Okay.
The box hanging off a flagpole.
Like a box of some sort?
Yes. This is what it looks like currently.
And that's the one on Colony that's got like a chain link fence around it or something?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yep.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
question please.
Yes, sir.
Does it ever have a flag on it?
No.
Why not?
I can find out.
Isn't your company patriotic?
We have a lot of flagpoles. I can find out for you.
I never could understand why, if you put a flag on it, people wouldn't even notice how big it is. I mean, I never could understand why you don't put flags on the flagpoles.
Why don't you make the box bigger for future expansion, put it at the top and paint it like a flag, okay? There you
That's a
go.
good idea.
Okay?
Yeah, but then she'd have to be able to raise and lower it at the same time. So that's a whole other, now it just became an engineering project.
But you just light it, you could leave it up.
That's right.
I
Yes,
don't-
sir.
I don't know if we have this on our standards, but, you know, as the technology changes, I do understand a little bit of the possibility if these towers do get, you know, abandoned down the road, you know, we have a whole lot of towers to clean up. But I think it's important, and I don't know if it's in our codes or not, that if there's nothing built in the fall zone of these towers, okay, then they can essentially be dropped down the road like big trees, and the scrap metal guys will come in and get that metal real quick like. So, I mean, I think that's pretty important. I mean, for what it is, it's simple. I mean, if, like, for instance, the one on Lorraine that gentleman's asking for, if something happens, the cell phone towers aren't needed anymore, and the cell phone companies aren't around to take them down, cables can be cut, you know, can be dropped on a calm day with no property damage, and there's some residual value that scrap will pay for getting it hauled off. So I think that's an important thing, if we can keep that in mind when we're putting these towers up. There's nothing, by the picture of this, there's nothing anywhere near this thing, right?
No.
Yeah.
Right.
Not really.
Any further questions?
Nope, I have a picture if you guys want to see what's around it.
You can put it on there if you want.
Really big, but
There's one of them.
Can you point to where that tower's at? Is that red dot? There we go. Okay. All right. Any further questions or comments? All right, thank you for your
Thank
time.
you.
We will move on to Bill 4474.
Bill number 4474, request by Michael Hurlbert, sponsored by John White and Mike Elam. An ordinance authorizing the county executive or his designee to execute a grant agreement and funding approval with the State Emergency Management Agency for a grant from the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, to fund 100% of the projected total cost of acquiring and demolishing 2 residential structures sustaining severe and repetitive loss in flood hazard zones of unincorporated St. Charles County.
Any questions or comments about this bill? Seeing none, we'll move on to Bill 4475.
Bill number 4475, requested by Michael Hurlbert, sponsored by Mike Elam, Dave Hammond, Terry Hollander, Mike Klinghammer, and John White. An ordinance amending Chapter 500 Building Codes and County Building Commission, Ordinances of St. Charles County, Missouri, OSCCMO, by adopting with amendments the 2015 International Building Code, the 2015 International Residential Code for 1- and 2-family dwellings, 2015 International Existing Building Code, 2015 International Mechanical Code, 2015 International Fuel Gas Code, 2014 National Fire Protection Association 70-National Electric Code, 2015 International Plumbing Code, 2015 International Private Sewage Disposal Code, 2015 International Energy Conservation Code, 2015 International Fire Code, 2015 International Swimming Pool and Spa Code, respectively.
If I can, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to have Drew Hefner come forward and talk about some changes that I would like to make as far as an amendment to this bill.
Yes, sir.
When I was preparing for today's meeting on Friday, one of the issues that we talked about was that there are some high fees that were associated with the, if you don't have a permit or if your permit lapses. So I asked, working through Jared and with Drew's help, he drafted a sizable document that will, apparently these fees come up in several different places. I'll let Drew take it from there and explain exactly what the changes are. But I'd like that to, I'll be making an amendment to incorporate these changes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the bequest of Mr. Klinghammer, I did make some amendments to the Bill 4475. And really, all I amended were the penalty provisions for each section. So kind of by way of a little background, what traditionally happens is each of those codes that were read to you, they had a penalty provision that violation of this code is a misdemeanor. And so that's what the code had said for years. Then in the last couple years, with a lot of municipal court reform, the Missouri legislature had amended and placed some caps in place on particular fines associated with certain violations. So not all violations, but just certain violations where they found municipalities were kind of taking advantage of their citizens and hitting them with high fines to kind of finance some of these smaller municipalities. So we had amended in this code just those code sections or those codes that the legislature put caps on. What I have done at the request of Councilman Klinghammer is in the other sections that had remained just the general misdemeanor language, I pulled out the language that set out penalties of up to a year imprisonment and a fine of up to $1,000, and I've replaced that with the section of the Missouri code that just referenced the penalty provisions for misdemeanors. So other than that, I haven't changed any of the technical information. I've just changed the penalty provisions for those codes.
Very well. Mr. Klinghammer?
I want to recognize both Joe Cronin and Joe Brazel as pointing this out originally. They're the ones that found it in the multiple page document that we were first given, and this just implements the changes that the two Joes brought to our attention.
Very well. Anyone have any more questions for Drew?
Can you get us a copy of what you've worked on? Okay.
I've provided a copy to Councilman Klinghammer.
It'll be in everybody's, I just got it.
Electronic version of maybe just the changes, so I don't have to read this whole thing again. Okay, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
I can do that.
Thank you, Drew.
You're welcome. Anything else?
I have.
All right. We'll let you go.
All right.
Mr. Cronin?
I apologize that I haven't worked on this as much as I wanted to, because I've been really busy, but this thing is massive. That's what you got to go through.
Right.
And unfortunately, I wish we were like our Congress, where we'd have a congressional budget office that we could go to and say, what's this going to cost? What's this going to cost to implement in this county? So not having those resources, I've called a lot of builders. I have some discussions with the Home Builders Association too. And I would caution the Home Builders Association, be careful what you ask for, because the builders are telling me right off the bat, with just skimming the top of this, that it's $3,000 to $8,000 a home, okay? And not only that, but there's particularly the wood I-joist and firefighters, the wood I-joist, I put this report out. Switching over, one builder in the county said they're going to switch away from manufacturing floor joists to traditional sawn lumber. And if anybody that's real keyed up on home building construction, custom homes now are all made with manufactured joists. The benefits are they're straighter, they're stronger, and you can stick a drywall to the bottom side of them and it's perfectly true. Sawn lumber, they take the good top and put up for the floor, they put the bottom on the bad on the bottom, and you got a wavy floor in the basement. So there's a lot of benefits to those type of joists. And the biggest problem I have is with these. And in discussing with the builders, that is their biggest thing too. The data about how much safer this makes the house is arguable at best. The difference is a matter of a few extra minutes a firefighter might get. In fact, one insurance report said this particular floor joist construction wasn't as big as fire danger to new houses, it's new furniture. That the old flash point on old furniture in the 70s was about 30 minutes, and new flash furniture will flash at 1100 degrees in 5 minutes. So what I guess I'm saying is, I'd like to hear more from the builders of this county, how it's going to affect them. And no disrespect to the ladies from the Home Builders Association, but I went out and talked to some of the builders about it, several of them. One builder in particular builds in the city of Wentzville. They also build in St. Charles County. They also build in Warren and Lincoln County, okay? They told me in Wentzville, because Wentzville did adopt this, okay, just a few weeks ago, that they went, and Wentzville did allow them to get all their permits for Wentzville. They're building 45 homes in Wentzville this year, and they got 45 permits, so they didn't have to do it under this new program. Additionally, they said it's going to make our homes pricing considerably higher than their Warren County, okay, and Lincoln County homes, which I think also hurts our building industry in this county. And the other thing is they question how this is going, they don't think this is going to make the house any better, okay? We already have, by code, wired fire alarm systems. When there's smoke in the house, alarm goes out through the whole house to tell people to get out. Firefighters have thermal imaging equipment where they can see where the fire's at. How many thousands of dollars do we need to spend for that little extra margin of safety of a few minutes? And that's if you want my support from this, from the building department, I need to know more about that, because what I'm hearing from the field and in the building industry is this is going to raise our price of our entry-level housing stock. A lot of young families that look to move to St. Charles County, particularly in my district in Wentzville, may be priced out of homes because of the fact that they have to adhere to these new codes. Wentzville has already talked about them. I talked to the mayor today. He's realizing that there's a lot of problems. He didn't vote on it, but the Board of Aldermen did, and they're concerned about it. So that's my concerns about the whole thing. If we want, I don't want to rush the passage of this through. I think we need to do our due diligence, because the home building industry is extremely important to this county. A lot of people, of our citizens, work in the home building industry. A lot of young families rely on good, affordable housing in our county. And passing this without doing due diligence and figuring out the consequences, to me, is bad public policy. And I'd like to slow the train down, figure out the figures, and move on.
Mr. Klinghammer.
And Joe, I understand where you're coming from. It makes sense from that standpoint. However, comparing St. Charles County and Lincoln County doesn't really, it's not a good comparison. Lincoln County threw up their hands completely, and they don't even inspect out there. I don't think that is the standard that we need to work towards. It is, I believe in building codes. We build houses in Lincoln County, and we build them to St. Charles codes. Lincoln County doesn't do any inspections at all, though. So it is, it's not a standard that I think that we need to compare ourselves against. And I also looked at it from, does this item in particular, is it hurting the market? And for St. Charles City has already adopted this code, and so far it is not affecting the ability to build and sell homes. The villages of Provence, right down at the end of 5th Street, 5th and Randolph, is selling out extremely quickly. Newtown has a new resurgence of building that's going on. So right now, anyway, the evidence isn't there that it's affecting the ability for builders to build and sell new homes. As just looking out, or literally looking out the window here and seeing what's going on in this particular market.
Mr. Brazel.
Well, first, I'd like to thank you guys for making some of the changes that you did make. But I agree with both of you. I agree with Mr. Cronin on the fact that this floor joist thing there's never been any evidence to prove that it's going to make the home better. And you can always sway numbers one way or the other with surveys and whatever else. But what we have to keep in mind is yeah, we don't want to be like Lincoln County or Warren County. I agree with that. But we don't want to necessarily be like St. Louis County either. And a lot of people lived in St. Louis County who live here now. And one reason a lot of people move out here, especially young families, is because the housing stock is much more affordable. You get a good quality home. And what we're doing is we're adding cost that's not going to be recognizable, because it's not added value, is what I'm saying, not to the consumer. It's really irrelevant what home builders think as far as making it better for them, because they're just passing the cost on to our children and to our family members and friends. And that's what we have to be concerned about. So the whole floor joist issue is not a proven fact. And so what we do know is it's going to add probably to a 2,400 square foot house over $10,000, because if you go with floor joist, you got to have added steel, because you can't run the span as long. Or if you add the I-joist, then you have to drywall it, and then when you drywall it, most people can't afford remodeling their basement when they buy a new home, and then they got to come in and remove the drywall anyway to do the plumbing, electrical, et cetera. And so it just doesn't make a lot of sense. And so we're taking rules from people who, there's no evidence is what we're doing here with this particular issue. Some of the stuff I get, I understand there's new concepts and new ideas and new products that we have to insert into our codes, but you don't want to over-regulate. You can only make something so safe. Same with cars, anything. You can make it only so safe. And so what we're doing here is we're over-regulating it because we're being told by people who do this for a living. But are the consumers being asked, do I get true value out of that? No, not really. Is it safer now that we did that? No, not really. So why are we doing it? We don't really know, because we're being told we need to do it by bureaucrats. So that's why this upgrade in these building codes in a lot of instances doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. If someone could tell me specifically, this is why we're doing it. It's going to make it better for this reason. Specifically this reason, specifically this reason, and specifically this reason, then it's okay. Okay, you sold me on it. I haven't been sold on this. Now, for some reason, this council thinks that we have to pass this, and I don't understand that either. I don't know where the pressure's coming from. The HBA sent a letter of agreement over simply because they think that they got 5 votes and it's going to happen anyway. They don't necessarily, if you ask them, do you want this new 2015 ABC? The answer would be no. If I have a choice, absolutely not. They don't want it, but they think it's going to happen anyway, so they're going to be agreeable to it. Now, you can look at whoever and ask them what their real answer is, but if you ask individual builders, that's what they will tell you. And I'm not concerned about the builders. As someone made a comment about the HBA, I'm not talking to them about what their profits are. I'm talking about my kids that are buying houses in St. Charles County. I'm talking about people who are trying to buy a 1,500 square foot house and another $10,000, $20,000. That could be furniture, or it could be a lot of things. And so that's why I don't agree with it. It's not about, it's just about proving to me that this is absolutely needed, and why are we doing it? And I haven't been given a good answer on that yet.
Mr. Hammond.
Yeah, I guess I would like to respond by saying, it has to do with keeping up with the technology and also keeping up with uniform codes throughout this county. When we adopt the code, a lot of the cities, their building officials meet and we discuss the different codes and issues that we see with that for building officials, and they move in the same direction so that things are uniform in the county. You don't have to go from one city and be required to do something and go to another city and they have entirely different rules. That makes it a lot more difficult for all the building industry. I think if this one issue, the wood I joist, is that a big concern by Councilman Brazel? And I think I'd be willing to second an amendment if you're going to offer it, to have the fire protection removed from the I joist, and be glad to proceed that way if that's a big issue with you all.
Mr. Cronin.
I think that is the biggest issue, because while I was concerned about the size of outbuildings and the house of fences out in the farm areas that I represent, the biggest thing to me is to keep the home building industry going in this county, make sure the young families want to buy a house, can afford a new house. Talking to the builders and HBA folks, the joist is the biggest issue. So I like Mr. Hammond's suggestion, and I would like Mr. Hefner to prepare, if he's still here.
He is.
Prepare an amendment to that effect. I don't think that's to be too cumbersome for the building officials as well, because the 2015 code also requires sprinkler systems, and we're opting out of that as well. So we could also opt out of the floor joist. And the thing of it would be is I think the ultimate end of it, the builders I've talked to are responding either one or two ways. Either they're going to put more steel and go back to dimensional sawed lumber, which is in that instance you got an inferior house, or B, they're going to cover up those joists with drywall. My son is a young fellow with a new wife and a new baby. He lives in Wentzville, and his subdivision, or like a lot of subdivisions in Wentzville, if you go to Wentzville restaurants, you'll see most of the people in there 25, 30 years old. Old guys like me don't fit too well. But almost the thing it's kind of neat generational thing. It's like a rite of passage for those guys when they buy their houses and they can barely get in the house, and then they want to go finish their basement themselves. And my son did it, and all his neighbors did it, and then they hang out at their basement. But in Sunday's paper, there's a nice article about a family in O'Fallon that took their basement and they made it look like the Scott Trade Center for the Blues games. And if you look at the picture, if you got the paper at home, look at the top, it's manufactured floor joists, and they painted them gray so they look like the rafters at Scott Trade. So the other thing too is by covering those up with drywall, it makes it much difficult for them to finish their basements off like most young families do. So, because they have to take all the drywall down to get the electric and the plumbing and the ductwork. Also, the builders thought that would be the builder I thought that would be a big problem at inspection time, because when they turn the water on, if something leaks, then oh my gosh, you got to take all the drywall down to figure out where it's leaking. So, I like Dave's idea, and I would be a lot more supportive of this if we could get that in there.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
I just want to point out that covering it with drywall is not the only solution, and the builders that I've talked to that are building in Provence down here on Fifth Street have chose to get the fire-treated version of the floor joist. They're still using them. They're just buying the fire-treated ones. And the guy that I spoke to was one of the carpenters, and he didn't know what the additional cost was. So the route that they chose to go there was with the fire-treated ones. And I went down to Newtown where they're building new homes also, and they chose to use drywall to encapsulate it that way. So different builders are using different means of solving the problem.
Mr. Brazel.
No, I was just gonna, one thing about the International Building Code also is when Dave said that you want to make everything the same, you don't want to change from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. In fact, we should be different because, like, for instance, when you talk about international, the building codes down south in Florida, Mississippi, stuff like that, are much different than the ones up north for the frost lines and things like that. And what they're doing is they're making it across the board equal code. So that creates problems as well because things are different, humidity levels, wind uplift, different in Midwest and in other parts of areas. So that's another problem I kind of have with the International Building Code. It's not jurisdictional, which with insulation and everything else, it should be jurisdictional. And so there's a little bit more to it, but I do appreciate the fact that you would consider a compromise because that makes it a little more acceptable, you know. So I just think that there's some things that we should, and I know, Michael, we've been talking about this for a while, so I understand why you put it forward. If something's got to happen, you got to move it. But I do think that there's some things that we could address and try to make it a little more acceptable for me anyway.
Same way.
Mr. Hammond?
I was just going to comment that the codes are international, and what they've done on the international codes, there's a map, a regional map of this country, and based on where you live in this country, the codes vary based on, for example.
Zone 1 through 6.
Yeah,
Right?
for example, up north, they have much higher snow loads than we do that require greater strength in their roofs so they don't collapse from the heavy snow loads, where this part of the country, we're in the middle, so our codes are kind of at the middle of the road there for the type of snows that we get. And down south, they have theirs are even less because they have little or no snowfall. So the codes do adjust for the different regions of the country.
Do any other questions or comments on this bill?
One
Yes, sir.
last thing. I understand, Mike, your comments about Lincoln County, but let me just say there's a subdivision in my district called Jackson Estates. It's been a real pain for the county for a lot of years. Okay, Mr. Gross, it's too bad he left because he knows all about it.
I know all about it. I voted
He knows
no
all
for
about it. One of the builders that was talking about it, who had a lot of concerns, was one of the builders in Jackson Estates. That subdivision's been dormant for 10 years, and now we got activity. They want to build homes out there. So I think that this would help them a lot too if we do an amendment similar to what Dave is suggesting. Okay.
Any other questions or comments? So I would plan on the fact that we are going to have a substitute bill for our meeting at the end of the month. Mr. Klinghammer, I understand you will not be here for that meeting, correct?
That's correct.
All right, so just wanted to confirm that we've got that. So we'll move on to Bill number 4476.
Bill number 4476, an ordinance authorizing 4 agreements between St. Charles County and the City of St. Peters relating to St. Charles County's Urban County Community Development Block Grant CDBG program, including 1, a 2017 Professional Administrative Services Agreement, and 2, a 2017 agreement for administering urban county programs through May 31st, 2017.
Any questions or comments on this bill?
Yes,
I'd like to amend Bill number 4476 and replace it with substitute Bill number 4476.
Seconds.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? So we'll move on to substitute Bill 4476.
You just move over to
Do I need to read that again, I guess?
I was asking you that question.
I will. Substitute Bill number 4476, an ordinance authorizing 2 agreements between St. Charles County and the City of St. Peters relating to St. Charles County's Urban County Community Development Block Grant CDBG program, including 1, a 2017 Professional Administrative Service Agreement, and 2, a 2017 Agreement for administering urban county programs through May 31st, 2017.
I was thinking you needed to read it because we went from 4 to 2, but I wasn't sure about that part.
It's
So,
done, so
any
it's
questions or comments about this bill? Seeing none, thanks for reading it again. We'll move on to 4477.
Bill number 4477, request by Michael Hurlbert, sponsored by Mike Elam, an ordinance authorizing 4 agreements between St. Charles County and the City of St. Charles relating to St. Charles County's Urban County Community Development Block Grant CDBG program, including 1, a cooperation agreement for the City of St. Charles to join the urban county, 2, a 2017 Professional Administrative Services Agreement, 3, a 2018 Professional Administrative Services Agreement, and 4, a 2017 Agreement for administering urban county programs.
Any questions or comments about this bill? Seeing none, move on to 4478.
Bill number 4478, request by Amanda Brower, sponsored by council as a whole, an ordinance approving execution of supplemental cost share agreement number 1 to an intergovernmental agreement with the Missouri Highways and Transportation Commission and the City of Wentzville for improvements on US 61 between Route A and Piney Road.
Any questions or comments about this bill? Yes, sir.
I'd like to thank John Greifsey for a lot of work on this project. We had a little cost overrun on the new overpass, but John's really done a fine job on this, and this just goes all along. John, you were right all along, okay? And you know what I mean. So anyway, it's a project that's moving on now, and this bill will allow it to continue. A lot of people get killed at that intersection. It's going to be a real success story when we get this done. Thank you, John.
Mr. Hammond.
Also, I was really disappointed a couple of years ago when this thing didn't start because that is such a dangerous area down there, and with continued growth and not just in this county but up north, it's only going to get worse, and I'm just so happy that this is finally going to get built, and thanks for everybody that pushed to get it done.
Excellent. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, that'll wrap us up with bills for introduction. We have no table bills. Move on to announcements and miscellaneous. Then, Mr. Hollander, I would move to you.
I'd like to make a motion to go into closed session pursuant to state statute RSMO 610.02112.
Second. I have a motion made in a second. Roll call.
Councilmember Cronin?
Yes.
Councilmember Brazel?
Yes.
Councilmember Hammond?
Yes.
Councilmember Elam?
Yes.
Councilmember Hollander?
Yes.
Councilmember Klinghammer?
Yes.
Councilmember White?
Yeah.
We will move into closed session and be back when we're on. Entertain a motion to come out of closed session.
I'd like to make a motion to come out of closed session.
I have a motion made and second. Do we roll call this one? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Entertain a motion to dismiss.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Aye. We are dismissed.